Let's expand on this imagination regarding the 911 series diesel locomotive, which was considered the fastest in the world at the time. The 911 series was equipped with two DML61 engines developed for the DD51, designed for rescue hauling of stranded 16-car, 960-ton Shinkansen EMUs. The Shinkansen, even on the Tokaido line, has challenging sections with gradients of 20 per mile, requiring high adhesive performance to haul trains out of such situations. Simultaneously, the locomotive needed to achieve high-speed performance of 160 km per hour to quickly reach the scene. Given such high-speed capabilities, one might think, what if, about this imaginative scenario? Although diesel Shinkansen was often joked about in industry discussions, it was never seriously considered as there were no concept of non-electrified Shinkansen. Later, influenced by the Japanese Archipelago Renovation Theory, the idea of a nationwide Shinkansen network emerged. During a period when financial feasibility became unclear, the concept of a gas turbine Shinkansen capable of 260 km per hour operation was researched for non-electrified sections, but no concrete steps were taken. The Liberal Democratic Party proposed the nationwide Shinkansen network plan in 1970. 6 years after the Shinkansen's opening, Japan was in the midst of rapid economic growth, and there were high expectations for a grand plan to create a high-speed transportation network across the country using Shinkansen and expressways. This time, let's imagine what would have happened if a proposal to operate regional Shinkansen lines without electrification had been made at that time. Following the discussion on the 911 series, let's imagine a locomotive haul system. First, let's consider whether it would be possible to operate at 200 km per hour by hauling several passenger cars with the 911 series. Assuming passenger cars with cabin space similar to the 0 series and that the technology at the time could reduce the loaded weight of one car to 50 tons, we can examine the acceleration curve when hauling 7 cars. The performance in the low-speed gear range is also shown, but since switching gears cannot be done while running, the green curve represents the performance during high-speed operation. The vertical axis of the acceleration curve is in units of kilograms per ton, which corresponds to the resistance due to gradients, matching the values of gradients in per mile units. The horizontal axis represents speed in kilometers per hour. For example, in this diagram, when the value on the vertical axis is 20, the curve passes through the point where the horizontal axis value is 40. This means the train can climb a 20 per mile gradient at a speed of 40 km per hour. When considering this in terms of acceleration, it might be hard to grasp exactly how much acceleration this represents. It's easier to understand acceleration in terms of how many seconds it takes to accelerate to a certain speed. To convert this, you divide the value on the vertical axis by 27.8, giving you an approximate rate of acceleration in kilometers per second. In reality, the apparent acceleration is affected by the rotational acceleration components due to the changes in rotation of the wheels and other parts of the vehicle. This usually results in a perceived acceleration that is 5% to 10% lower, depending on the vehicle type. Reviewing this curve with these factors in mind, the poor acceleration of this train becomes evident. While the low-speed performance is still somewhat acceptable, the high-speed acceleration is so leisurely that it might seem as though the speed only increases when forgotten about. The balancing speed on level ground, or the maximum speed that can be achieved on a flat, straight section, is shown here. Unfortunately, it doesn't even reach 160 km per hour, making it unsuitable for operation as a Shinkansen train. The reality of hauling 7 passenger cars with a total loaded weight of 350 tons using a 2,000 horsepower hydraulic diesel locomotive is indeed challenging. The performance of the 911 series increased to 1,100 horsepower with enhancements to the DML61 engine starting from the second unit. By the time the nationwide Shinkansen network plan was proposed, The DML61 engine had been upgraded to 1350 horsepower, allowing for a 2,700 horsepower locomotive with 2 engines. As mentioned in the DF51 video, there were plans to boost the DML61 engine to 1,500 horsepower, resulting in a 3,000 horsepower locomotive with 2 engines. So, what would happen with 3,000 horsepower? This diagram shows the state of hauling 7 cars. With the same gear ratio as the 911 series, it can achieve 160 km per hour with 7 cars. Let's adjust the gear ratio to accommodate 200 km per hour. In high-speed operation, where air resistance increases proportionally to the square of the speed, even a slight speed increase requires considerable effort. The train struggles to maintain 180 km per hour, let alone reach 200 km per hour. Unlike European high-speed trains with smaller cross-sections to reduce air resistance, such a design was not feasible in Japan at the time. Reluctantly reducing the number of passenger cars to 5, this setup finally achieves 200 km per hour. However, there's almost no acceleration margin, akin to the EF65 hauling a blue train at 110 km/h. Unable to reach maximum speed without utilizing downhill gradients. On a 10 per mile uphill gradient, it only manages 121 km per hour, faster than the 82 series diesel railcar express, but still outperformed by the 181 series. Even with high-standard Shinkansen lines, this performance is insufficient. Practical 200 km per hour operation would require double heading, but the F configuration's axle load issues complicate matter. The complex structure to transmit power to the middle bogie raises doubts about its durability for 200 km per hour operation. However, let's not forget the DMP-81 engine from that era. Developed for the DE50, it produced 2,000 horsepower, and a compatible hydraulic transmission was also developed, forming JNR's final and most powerful hydraulic drive system. Using 2 of these engines would result in a 4,000 horsepower locomotive. Fitting 2 of these engines in an F configuration to keep the axle load at 16 tons is impossible. They'd need to be fitted as single units in a D configuration. They would then need to be coupled for operation like the DD50. With 4,000 horsepower hauling 7 passenger cars, the performance would just barely reach 200 km per hour. Achieving top speed would still be difficult without downhill gradients. If we reduce the number of passenger cars to 5, this setup would finally have some acceleration margin at 200 km per hour, but it would still be minimal. Using 2 D-type configurations, a setup similar to the UK's high-speed train, HST, could be considered. The HST configuration places a 2,000 horsepower power car at each end, with passenger cars in between. If back then they had built non-electrified Shinkansen locomotives in this manner, Japan might have realized the world's first 200 km per hour diesel train. The HST includes 7 to 9 passenger cars. And these cars are compact and lightweight at 33 tons each, achieving 200 km per hour through their light weight. Let's imagine forming a train with DMP-81 engines and such lightweight passenger cars. Assuming a 40-ton loaded weight per car, this diagram shows the calculations. It barely reaches 200 km per hour, but its acceleration margin is weak compared to the HST's additional 500 horsepower. Without a specific plan for non-electrified Shinkansen, it remains a speculative scenario whether such trains would have had a place. On regional routes, short formations might have sufficed, and a locomotive method could have boosted performance with shorter formations. However, operation on electrified lines alongside Shinkansen to enter non-electrified sections would have been challenging. Even achieving 200 km per hour, slight uphill gradients would drastically reduce speed. A short, slow train on busy Shinkansen lines would be unwelcome. Introducing an expensive Shinkansen system to regions where short formations suffice, even on non-electrified single lines, raises contradictions. Amid JNR's management crisis, Shinkansen speed improvements were slow, but post-privatization, situations changed, and soon 260 km per hour and 300 km per hour became standard, leaving diesel operation behind. Calls for new Shinkansen lines persist in regional areas, but even a non-electrified single-track system seems unlikely to materialize in the current state.